So when the United States captured Venezuela's sitting president last week and flew him to New York to face criminal charges, it didn't just escalate tensions in the Americas. It forced countries like South Africa to show very publicly where they stand when power is exercised outside the rulebook. So in case you missed it, the US confirmed it has taken President Nicolas Maduro into American custody, framing the operation as a long-running law enforcement action tied to drug trafficking and organized crime. Supporters argue that Washington acted where international mechanisms had failed, that sovereignty shouldn't shield world leaders from accountability. Now, critics, though, call it a unilateral grab that bypassed due process entirely and set a precedent for powerful states acting first and justifying later. Others, though, also raise questions about whether strategic interests, including Venezuela's oil reserves, have influenced that decision. Now, South Africa landed firmly in the second camp. Our government condemned the operation as a violation of the UN Charter, stressing respect for sovereignty and warning against unilateral force. It's language that South Africans have heard before, from Russia's invasion of Ukraine to conflicts in the Middle East. South Africa has always positioned itself as a defender of international law while resisting interventions that it sees as destabilizing or selectively applied. Now, the tension here is that stance comes with trade-offs. South Africa presents itself as non-aligned, but over time, its responses have repeatedly placed itself at odds with Washington, at a point when our relationship with the US is already rocked by tariff threats and trade pressure. And so our country remains deeply dependent on export markets, which means that standing against the world's largest consumer economy carries real consequences. And so the question here isn't whether the principle of our position is right or wrong, it's how sustainable it becomes as those costs stop becoming theoretical. So international pressure is one kind of problem, but closer to home, South Africa is dealing with a different kind of system strain. The NSFAS has locked in funding for more than 1 million students in 2026, including over 600,000 first years. But getting that money now looks less like approval and more like surviving a gauntlet. I mean, on paper, funding decisions are final, but in practice, a huge chunk of students are stuck in the in-between, waiting for documents to clear, appealing outcomes, or dealing with unpaid fees from last year that are now blocking registration. So this is where the system creaks. Funding gets locked in early, but everything that students actually need happens much later. I mean, matric results drop on January 12th, institutional confirmations trickle in after that, and the appeal window closes on these strict 30-day deadlines. And so think about it, the result here is a timing gap where you're technically funded, but practically frozen. And if you miss a document deadline or your appeal stalls, your funding vanishes. Now, the NSFAS says that it has cleared most of the outstanding payments from 2025. But campuses are still dealing with the fallout. Students who can't register because fees were never fully settled, and graduates who can't access their certificates that they've already earned. And so while the scheme can point to 1 million funded students, the lived experience seems to be far messier. And so for many, the challenge isn't qualifying for support, it's surviving the delay between approval and reality. So while students are waiting for systems to catch up, there's at least one cost that is moving in the right direction for everyone. South Africans are getting a historic fuel price cut from tomorrow, with petrol and diesel prices falling to their lowest levels since February 2022, after a long, painful run at the pumps. Now, this drop is a real one. I mean, petrol is down roughly 60 cents a litre and diesel by up to R1.50. But this isn't the result of some policy shift or fundamental change in how our oil markets work. It's coming down to two things lining up at the same time. Global oil markets sitting with more supply than buyers need right now, and a rand that is strengthened just enough to make imports cheaper. So what's driving this oversupply is simple. Big oil producers just kept pumping at high levels while global demand softened. And so for now, that means lower transport costs and less pressure on inflation. But as we've seen, oil prices don't drift, they can jump. I mean, a geopolitical shock like Venezuela, a supply cut, or a sudden swing in the rand can quickly flip the script. And so the bigger question here is how long it lasts, because South Africans have learned the hard way that fuel relief doesn't always stick around for long. As for now though, best you enjoy the cheaper fill-up. And before we cruise on to our bagel bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, South Africa's biggest medical scheme is clawing back millions after a year-long pharmacy billing error. Around 8,700 Discovery members are being told to repay an average of 20 grand for benefits they unknowingly received, sparking legal and regulatory disputes. South Africa's trade surplus more than doubled in November to 37.7 billion rand, driven mainly by a sharp drop in imports rather than stronger exports. Lower petroleum and vehicle imports helped to offset weaker shipments in gold, aluminium, and citrus fruit. And Joburg residents are facing low water pressure or outages this week as Rand Water begins Phase 3 maintenance, shutting the Arkenhof pumping station for 54 hours. Officials warn full supply restoration could take up to 7 days. And apologies before we get into that bagel bite, I've just got a quick message here from Anshay, our head of community. She wants everyone to know that the community channels are officially live, both on Instagram as a broadcast channel and on YouTube under the Posts tab. She says that this is where we will share quick updates, behind the scene moments, polls, and the occasional bit of trivia to keep you on your toes. Now, I've taken a look at what Anshay has in store for these channels, and it's super exciting. So please make Anshay's day, join the channel, and get involved. And on to our bagel bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, what is the name of the line that separates day and night on Earth? Is it A, the equator, B, the terminator, or C, the meridian? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. Twice a day, the ocean pulls back from South Africa's coastline and then floods in again. Not because of wind or weather, but because the moon is dragging itself around the planet. Look, most people know that tides exist, but far fewer realize that they're watching gravity in action. So here's what's happening. The moon's pull draws water towards it, creating a bulge on one side of the Earth facing the moon, and another bulge on the opposite side. And so as the planet rotates, coastlines move through these bulges and the water rises and falls. And the sun adds its own tug too. I mean, when the sun and the moon align, their combined pull creates stronger spring tides. But South Africa doesn't just experience this. It tracks it. A network of tide gauges scattered along our coast have been recording sea level shifts for decades, feeding global climate databases that scientists use to model storm surges, coastal erosion, and rising oceans. And because the southern hemisphere has far fewer long-term measurements than the north, South Africa's data fills that gap. And so every time the tide turns here, we're not just watching the ocean move, we're helping the world to understand how it works. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is the Terminator. I know, surprised me too. The line that separates day from night as the Earth rotates. It's not fixed, it's not straight, and it shifts every minute, which is why every sunrise and sunset never happens at the same time anywhere on Earth. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed watching this one as much as we enjoyed putting it together. Again, this is your reminder to please join those community channels. I really think you're going to enjoy it. And so on that note, I hope you guys have a great day further. Be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.